I thought my biggest challenge in college would be passing exams or keeping up with bills. But I was wrong. One quiet evening inside the campus library, everything changed. The person I was supposed to trust, my professor, crossed a line I never imagined. My name is Emma Carter, and I'm 22 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, a quiet yet vibrant city where every corner feels like a mix of rain, books, and endless coffee shops. I study psychology at Portland State University, and I'm here on a full scholarship, something that still feels surreal to me. Coming from a middle-class family, every dollar I earn and every grade I achieve means something bigger than just success. It means survival. My parents have always supported me, but I've learned early that life doesn't give you anything for free. That's why I work part-time at a small bookstore downtown, where the smell of old pages and freshly brewed coffee feels like home. Most days, I wake up before sunrise, catch the 7 a.m. bus to campus, attend lectures, then head to work until closing. It's exhausting, but I've never complained, because every night when I finally sit down to study, I feel proud of the life I'm building with my own hands. I've always believed education was my escape route to a better future. My professors often call me one of the most dedicated students in my department, and I guess that's true. I've always been the girl who sits in the front row, takes detailed notes, and dreams of someday becoming a counselor who helps others heal. I like helping people maybe because I know what it feels like to fight quietly inside and still keep smiling on the outside. My friends often tell me I take life too seriously, but for me, it's not about being perfect. It's about proving that I belong here despite the odds. Sometimes, late at night, when the city outside my apartment window hums with rain, I think about how far I've come, from a small public high school to one of Oregon's most respected universities. I think about the little girl who once believed college was only for others, not for someone like her. Now, here I am, proving her wrong every single day. Still, even with everything going well, there's a strange weight that lingers inside me, a fear I can't quite name. Maybe it's because I've seen how quickly good things can be taken away. Or maybe it's just the constant pressure of being the scholarship kid who can't afford to fail. Either way, I've learned to keep my head down, stay polite, and focus on my work. That was my rule, until the day someone broke it. I still remember the first time Professor Richard Hale looked at me a little longer than he should have. I didn't think much of it back then. Professors often have strong personalities. But something about the way his eyes followed me made me feel off balance, as if I was suddenly standing in the wrong room. I brushed it off, convinced myself it was just my imagination. After all, he was one of the most respected names in the department, admired by everyone for his research and confidence. Who was I to question him? I had no idea that this man, someone I was supposed to trust, would soon test the very core of my strength and make me question everything I believed about safety, respect, and the meaning of power. At first, I tried to convince myself that Professor Hale's lingering eyes and soft compliments were harmless. He was known as one of the toughest professors in the psychology department, someone whose approval every student secretly craved. He carried himself with a calm authority, always dressed neatly in tailored suits, his voice smooth and persuasive. During lectures, he often walked between the aisles as he spoke, but I started noticing that his steps slowed whenever he passed my desk. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was overanalyzing things the way psychology students often do. But the unease wouldn't go away. Every time his gaze landed on me, it felt like the air around me shifted. He began addressing me directly in class, asking questions I hadn't raised my hand for, praising my answers in ways that felt uncomfortably personal. Once, after I presented my research paper, he said, "Miss Carter, you have an exceptional mind and a rare kind of focus. It's refreshing." The class chuckled politely, but I felt my face flush. The compliment wasn't the problem. It was the tone, low and drawn out, like something meant only for me. After that day, I avoided eye contact as much as I could. I sat farther back, hoping to blend in, but somehow, he always noticed me. When I passed him in the hallway, he'd give a slow, knowing smile. Once he even said, "You should stop by my office sometime. I think your potential deserves a little extra guidance." His words were polite, but the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I didn't respond. I just nodded awkwardly and hurried away. That evening, at the bookstore where I worked, I couldn't focus on sorting the new arrivals. His voice kept echoing in my head. I didn't want to believe a professor could have such intentions. I needed his class to keep my scholarship steady. Failing was not an option. So, I did what most scared students do. I stayed quiet and pretended everything was fine. A week later, I was working on a group project after class when he stopped by again. "Emma," he said, resting his hand on my desk as he leaned forward. "I read your paper draft. Excellent work. You're ahead of most of your peers." His fingers tapped lightly on my notebook, so close I could feel the vibration. "I'd like to discuss it in depth. Why don't you come by tomorrow afternoon? I can help refine it for publication." The rest of the class watched, impressed. To them, it probably looked like a great opportunity. To me, it felt like a trap. Still, I forced a smile. "Thank you, Professor," I said softly, hoping he'd leave. The next day, I skipped his office hours entirely. When I walked into class, I could feel his eyes following me. He said nothing during the lecture, but when it ended, he approached me as the room emptied. "You didn't show up yesterday," he said, his tone calm but sharp. "I'm sorry," I replied quickly. "I had work." He studied me for a long moment before giving a faint smile. "We all make time for things that matter." The way he said it made me shiver. That evening, I called Samantha. I didn't tell her everything, just that one of my professors was making me uncomfortable. She told me to be careful, to keep my distance. "If anything feels wrong, trust your gut," she said. I promised her I would. But keeping distance became harder when he started messaging me through the university email system. The messages were subtle at first. "Excellent participation today," or "You have great analytical instincts." Then they became more personal. "You seem tired. Don't push yourself too hard," or "You have a rare energy in class. It's inspiring." I stopped replying. The next morning, he stopped me outside the lecture hall and said, "You didn't answer my email." I stammered something about being busy, but he smiled faintly and said, "That's okay. We'll talk soon." That smile stayed with me all day. It wasn't kind, it was calculating. I began dreading his class. Every time I walked through the department hallway, I checked corners before turning. I even started leaving my phone recording during lectures, just in case. The anxiety made me restless. My grades began slipping for the first time. I'd reread my notes at night, but couldn't remember a word of what I studied. The fear of losing my scholarship haunted me. I needed to stay invisible, yet somehow he made me feel like I was the only person in the entire university. One afternoon, as I sat in the back of the lecture hall, pretending to take notes, I looked up and saw him looking directly at me. Not at the class, not at the board, just me. His lips curled into a faint smile before he continued writing on the board. That was the moment I knew this wasn't in my head. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't. Because when a person in power decides to notice you for the wrong reasons, silence becomes the most dangerous kind of prison. It was a Thursday evening, one of those long nights when the campus felt half asleep. Most students had already gone home, and the sound of the rain tapping against the tall library windows made the silence heavier than usual. I was sitting at my usual corner table on the second floor, surrounded by piles of psychology journals and my laptop open to an unfinished research paper. Finals were just a few weeks away, and every hour mattered. The quietness of the library always helped me focus, but that night, something felt strange, like a storm was brewing somewhere I couldn't see. Around 8 p.m., I looked up from my notes and saw Professor Hale walking between the aisles of books. My stomach instantly tightened. I hadn't seen him outside class since the last time he cornered me about missing his office hours. I froze, praying he was there for someone else. But as he turned the corner, his eyes found mine, and that familiar, unsettling smile appeared on his face. "Emma," he said softly, his voice echoing in the quiet space. "Still working hard, I see." I tried to stay calm. "Yes, just finishing some notes, Professor." He stepped closer, pulling out the chair beside me. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, but before I could answer, he was already seated. The smell of his cologne filled the air, sharp and heavy. "You're one of my brightest students," he said, leaning forward. "You remind me of myself when I was your age, ambitious, focused, willing to do anything to get ahead." I nodded awkwardly, forcing a polite smile, my eyes fixed on my notes. "Thank you, sir." He chuckled quietly. "You don't need to be so formal when we're alone, Emma. You can call me Richard." I swallowed hard. "I'd rather keep it professional, Professor." His smile faded, replaced by something colder. "Professional," he repeated slowly, like the word offended him. Then, without warning, his hand landed on my shoulder. I flinched, but he didn't move it away. "You're tense," he murmured. "You need to relax more. You're too young to carry so much pressure." I shifted uncomfortably, trying to slide my chair back, but he leaned closer, his hand now brushing against my arm. My heart was pounding so loudly, I could barely breathe. "Please don't," I whispered. He ignored me. "Emma," he said, his tone dropping to a whisper. "You know, with my position, I can make things happen for you. Better grades, a research assistant spot, even a letter for your graduate applications. You deserve more than just hard work and luck. You deserve someone who believes in you." His words twisted inside me like poison. I pushed my chair back sharply, standing up. "I think I should go," I said quickly, but he grabbed my wrist before I could leave. "Don't walk away from me," he said, still smiling but with a firmness that made my legs tremble. "I'm offering you an opportunity. If you want to succeed, meet me this Friday at my farmhouse outside the city. We'll talk privately about your future." I pulled my hand free, feeling my throat tighten. "I'm not coming," I said, my voice shaking. He leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. "You might want to reconsider that," he said quietly, "because I'd hate to see such a talented student lose her scholarship over something so small." I stared at him, stunned. "Are you threatening me?" He smiled again, this time with complete arrogance. "I'm giving you a choice." Then he stood up, smoothed his jacket, and walked toward the exit like nothing had happened. I stood there frozen, watching his reflection fade in the glass doors until he was gone. When my knees finally stopped shaking, I sat back down, trying to steady my breathing. My hands trembled so badly, I could barely type. I kept replaying every second in my head, wondering if anyone had seen what happened. The library cameras, I remembered them suddenly. There were cameras near the main desk and the upper aisle. Maybe they caught something. I packed up quickly, rushing downstairs. The librarian, Mrs. Palmer, was still there, checking returns. "Everything okay, dear?" she asked kindly. I hesitated, forcing a weak smile. "Yes, just tired. Long day." She nodded, unaware of the storm raging inside me. When I stepped outside, the rain hit my face, cold and merciless. I stood there for a while, my books pressed against my chest, trying to figure out what to do. If I reported him, would anyone believe me? He was respected, admired. Everyone loved Professor Hale. I was just a scholarship student who couldn't afford trouble. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. His last words echoed in my mind like thunder. "I'm giving you a choice." That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the apartment, every gust of wind outside made me flinch. My phone buzzed at 1:14 a.m., a new email notification. My hands shook as I opened it. It was from him. The subject line read, "Friday, 7 p.m. Don't be late." I deleted it instantly, my heart hammering in my chest. Tears welled up as I stared at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time, I felt truly trapped. It wasn't just about my grades anymore. It was about my dignity, my safety, and the terrifying realization that silence might destroy me faster than fear ever could. The next few days felt like walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every knock on a door made my chest tighten. I kept replaying the scene in the library, his voice, his touch, the way he said, "Don't be late." I deleted that email, but the words stayed burned in my memory, like they were carved there. I stopped going to the cafeteria, stopped talking in class, and started keeping my head down. It didn't help. Professor Hale's gaze still found me no matter where I sat. He didn't even have to say anything anymore. Just the slight curve of his mouth across the lecture hall was enough to make my stomach turn. I didn't tell anyone. I was too scared. Part of me thought maybe if I ignored him, he'd get bored and move on. But the fear only grew stronger, heavier, suffocating me from the inside out. On Tuesday, Samantha cornered me after class. "Okay, Emma," she said, blocking the doorway with her backpack. "You've been acting strange for weeks. What's going on?" I forced a smile. "Nothing. Just stress." She crossed her arms. "You can't lie to me. You're shaking. You barely sleep. I can tell." My lips trembled before I even realized I was crying. "It's nothing, Sam. Please just drop it." But she didn't. She grabbed my shoulders, her eyes fierce.
"No. You're going to tell me."
"Whatever it is, you're not facing it alone." That was the moment something in me cracked. All the fear, all the shame I'd been carrying spilled out like a flood. I told her everything, from the stairs to the comments to what happened in the library. My voice kept breaking, and by the time I got to the part about the farmhouse invitation, I could barely breathe. When I finished, Samantha didn't speak for a long time. She just sat there, processing it, her jaw clenched. Then she said quietly, "That son of a..." She stopped herself, taking a deep breath. "Emma, listen to me. He doesn't get to do this to you. We're going to stop him." I shook my head immediately. "No, Sam, you don't understand. He's powerful. Everyone respects him. If I go to the administration without proof, they'll think I'm making it up." She looked at me steadily. "Then we get proof." I frowned.
"How?"
She leaned forward, her voice calm but sharp. "You said there are cameras in the library, right? We'll talk to the librarian, Mrs. Palmer. She might help us get the footage. And if he messages you again, don't delete it this time. Save everything. We'll build a case before he can twist the story." I stared at her, amazed by how sure she sounded. I'd been drowning in fear for days, and suddenly, her words felt like air. "Sam, you think this will work?" She squeezed my hand. "I don't think. I know. You're smart. You did nothing wrong. But we need to play this smart, too." That night, for the first time in days, I slept for a few hours. The next morning, Samantha came with me to the library. Mrs. Palmer looked surprised to see us so early. "You two again?" she said kindly. Samantha did the talking. "Ma'am, we need to check the security footage from last Thursday evening. Something happened near the second-floor reading section." Mrs. Palmer frowned, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "Is this about Professor Hale?" My heart jumped. You noticed him?" She nodded slowly. "He's been here late a few times. You didn't look comfortable that night, dear." I was worried. My throat tightened. "Can you help us?" Mrs. Palmer sighed. "I can't hand it over directly, but if there's a police report, I'll make sure they get it." It wasn't much, but it was enough. As we walked out, Samantha whispered, "See? The universe is already on your side." Over the next 2 days, Samantha made copies of my deleted emails from the digital trash folder and saved screenshots of every message. She was methodical, calm, and fearless. Her strength gave me mine. On Thursday night, she sat across from me at the small kitchen table in my apartment, our laptops open, papers scattered everywhere. "He asked you to meet him Friday, right?" she said. I nodded. "Tomorrow." She looked me straight in the eyes. "Then that's when we end this." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "We'll go to the police first. We'll tell them everything. They can set up surveillance near his farmhouse. You'll walk in, but not alone. Officers will be right behind you." I swallowed hard. "Sam, that's risky." She reached across the table, gripping my hand. "So, is staying silent?" There was something in her voice that made me believe her completely. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel powerless anymore. I felt ready. I still had fear, but now it had a direction. It was no longer the kind that paralyzes you. It was the kind that prepares you for battle. Friday arrived faster than I wanted it to. The morning light crept through my window, soft and cold, like it already knew what kind of day this was going to be. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying every possible outcome. What if something went wrong? What if he suspected something? What if the police didn't show up in time? Samantha kept telling me to breathe, to trust the plan. You're not going there to be a victim, she reminded me. You're going there to end this. Her confidence was the only thing holding me together. At noon, we met Officer Daniel Reed at the Portland Police Department. He was calm, direct, and professional. His presence alone made me feel safer. Samantha did most of the talking at first, explaining the situation, showing him the screenshots, the emails, and the evidence we'd managed to gather. When it was my turn, my voice trembled, but I told him everything from start to finish. He listened carefully, nodding, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, he said, "You've done the right thing, Emma. We'll handle it from here. All we need is for you to stick to the plan and trust us." The plan was simple on paper, but terrifying in execution. I would go to Professor Hale's farmhouse just as he had instructed. I'd wear a small voice recorder hidden inside my jacket pocket and a discreet camera clipped to my bag strap. The police would be waiting less than a mile away, monitoring the signal. As soon as they heard or saw anything that proved his intent, they'd move in. Samantha insisted on coming too, though Officer Reed told her she had to stay back with the team for safety. "I'm not letting her do this alone," she said firmly. He gave a small nod. "You'll be close, I promise." By evening, the sky had darkened into thick clouds, the kind that seemed to press down on you. The farmhouse was just outside the city, down a narrow road lined with trees that swayed under the wind. I'd never been out there before, but as I drove, the GPS guiding me through endless turns, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When the farmhouse finally appeared, a large, old-style wooden house surrounded by overgrown grass, I felt my heartbeat in my throat. I parked near the gate, took one last deep breath, and sent a quick text to Samantha. "I'm here." Her reply came instantly. "We're close. You got this." I stepped out, my shoes crunching against the gravel. The air smelled like wet earth and pine. The lights in the farmhouse were already on. Before I could knock, the door opened. Professor Hale stood there, smiling like he'd been expecting me for years, not days. "Emma," he said warmly. "You came. I knew you would." My stomach turned. I forced a smile. "You said you wanted to talk about my paper." He stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. "Of course. Let's not waste time. You've got real talent, Emma. I told you, I can help you get where you deserve to be." The inside of the house was dimly lit, with expensive-looking furniture and shelves lined with books. It would have been beautiful if not for the chill that ran through me with every step I took. He motioned toward the couch. "Sit. Can I get you something to drink?" "No, thank you," I said quickly, clutching my bag. He chuckled softly. "Still so nervous. You really don't have to be. I don't bite." He sat beside me, too close, his knee brushing against mine. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "I've been thinking about you a lot. You have that spark, drive, intelligence, beauty. You could go so far if you just learned to trust me." I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding. "I do appreciate your help, Professor, but—" He interrupted me, reaching for my hand. "Please. Call me Richard." His fingers tightened slightly around mine. "I told you before, Emma, I can make things easy for you. No more financial struggles. No more pressure. You could have it all." I pulled my hand back slowly. "That's not why I'm here." He leaned in closer, his smile fading. "Then why are you here?" His tone shifted, deeper, sharper, as if he'd finally dropped the pretense. "You think you can just ignore me, embarrass me in my own class, and get away with it?" His face was inches from mine now. "You have no idea how easily I can ruin you." I felt the tremor in my hands, but I held my ground. "You won't ruin anyone again," I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" I took a shaky breath. "You heard me." For a brief moment, confusion flickered across his face. Then, from outside, there was a faint but unmistakable sound, a car door closing. His expression changed instantly. "Who else is here?" he demanded, standing up. I stayed silent, my heart racing. He stormed toward the window, pulling the curtain aside. That's when blue and red lights flashed through the trees. Police! Open the door, a voice shouted from outside. His face drained of color. What did you do? He roared, turning toward me. Before he could take a step, the front door burst open. Officer Reed and two other officers entered, guns drawn but steady. Samantha stood behind them, her face pale but determined. Richard Hale, Reed said loudly, you're under arrest for sexual harassment, coercion, and abuse of authority. Hale froze, his mouth opening but no sound coming out. Reed continued reading him his rights as the other officers moved in and cuffed him. I stood still, trembling, tears streaming down my face, not from fear this time, but from relief so powerful it hurt. As they let him out, he turned his head and looked at me one last time, his voice low and bitter. You'll regret this, Emma. I met his eyes and said softly, No, Professor. You will. Outside, the cold air hit me like a wave. Samantha ran up and pulled me into a tight hug. It's over, she whispered. I nodded against her shoulder, sobbing quietly. It's finally over. Officer Reed walked over and said gently, You did incredibly well. Your courage made this possible. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The night that had begun with fear ended with freedom. And as the police car drove away, I realized that sometimes the bravest thing you can ever do isn't fighting back. It's refusing to stay silent. The hours after his arrest felt unreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. The farmhouse, the flashing lights, the sound of handcuffs closing. All of it blurred together in my mind as the police drove me and Samantha back to the station. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I thought that once he was gone, the fear would disappear too, but fear doesn't vanish that quickly. It lingers, waiting to make sure it's really safe to leave. Officer Reed met us in the hallway and guided us into a small room where I gave my full statement again, this time officially recorded. My voice shook when I described what happened, but he kept reassuring me. Take your time, Emma. You're doing great. They asked for access to my phone, the messages, and my university email. When I handed it over, part of me felt exposed, but I knew this was the only way to prove the truth. Later that night, they sent a team to collect the surveillance footage from the Portland State University Library. Mrs. Palmer, the librarian, provided it without hesitation, telling the officers she had always felt uneasy about how often Hale visited the library at night. She even mentioned that I'd looked frightened that evening. Her quiet statement gave me more relief than I expected. It meant someone had seen me, even when I thought I was invisible. Over the next few days, everything began to unfold quickly. The police found explicit messages and photos on Professor Hale's computer, along with emails he'd sent to multiple students under private aliases. It turned out I wasn't the only one. Several women from different classes came forward after hearing about the arrest, sharing their own stories. Some cried as they spoke, some couldn't look up, and some were just angry. Angry at themselves for staying quiet, angry that no one had noticed. Watching them, I realized how deep his manipulation went and how many lives he'd scarred under the guise of mentorship. Samantha stayed by my side through every meeting and interview. She kept telling me, You started something bigger than you realize. Still, part of me struggled with guilt. I kept wondering if I could have stopped him sooner, if maybe someone else wouldn't have suffered had I spoken earlier. Officer Reed told me one afternoon, That guilt doesn't belong to you, Emma. It belongs to him. Remember that. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of the case. Local headlines started appearing. Portland professor arrested for harassment of students. It was everywhere, on TV, online, even in the whispers around campus. At first, I wanted to hide. I didn't want anyone looking at me, pitying me, or defining me by what happened. But when I walked into the university one morning and saw a group of students, mostly women, holding signs that read, We believe you and speak up for justice, something inside me shifted. Portland State University suspended Hale indefinitely pending trial, and Dean Laura Bennett met with me personally to offer support. You showed more courage than most adults ever will, she told me, her voice sincere. We're reviewing every policy, every safety measure, because of you. Hearing that made me tear up. For the first time in weeks, my tears weren't from fear. They were from relief, maybe even pride. Samantha later helped me set up a meeting with the university's legal counselor to ensure that my academic record, scholarship, and privacy would remain protected. It felt strange talking about normal things again, assignments, exams, graduation, but it also reminded me that life was still mine to live. In the evenings, I'd sit by my window, watching the rain streak down the glass, thinking about how quickly my world had changed. Just a month ago, I was a student too afraid to speak. Now, my voice had become part of something that reached far beyond me. The investigation continued for several weeks, collecting witness statements, digital evidence, and formal testimonies. Every new piece of evidence strengthened the case. Hale's arrogance had left a trail too wide to hide. Samantha called it poetic justice. I called it truth finally catching up. One afternoon, Officer Reed stopped by the campus to update me. "The DA's office is filing formal charges," he said. "They'll take it to court within the next few weeks. You'll need to testify, but with the evidence we have, it's strong." I nodded, nervous but ready. He smiled faintly. "You know, Emma, it takes people years to find the kind of strength you've shown. Don't lose it." That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since it all began. He thought he could break me, I wrote, but all he did was prove that I'm stronger than the silence he depended on. I closed the notebook and looked out at the city lights flickering beyond the rain. For the first time, Portland didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like home again. The day of the trial arrived like the calm before a storm. The courthouse stood tall and gray under the overcast Portland sky, its marble steps gleaming with the morning drizzle. Samantha held my hand tightly as we walked inside. My heart was racing, but not from fear anymore, from anticipation, from the weight of everything that had led to this moment. I had rehearsed my testimony countless times in my head, but nothing could have prepared me for the chill that ran through me when I saw him again, Professor Richard Hale, sitting at the defendant's table in a dark suit, his face expressionless. It was strange how small he looked now, stripped of the authority and arrogance he once carried like armor. His lawyer sat beside him, flipping through a stack of papers, while the prosecutor from the district attorney's office nodded at me reassuringly from across the room. Judge Karen Mitchell presided over the case, her calm authority commanding the space. When the proceedings began, everything felt surreal, the clicking of pens, the murmurs from the benches, the sound of my name echoing through the courtroom when they called me to the stand. I took a deep breath, walked forward, and placed my hand on the Bible to swear the oath. My voice quivered slightly as I said, "I do." Then I sat down, facing the man who had tried to destroy me. The prosecutor started with simple questions: my background, my academic record, my relationship with the defendant as a student. I answered carefully, clearly, refusing to let my emotions cloud my words. When they asked me about the night in the library, I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't look away. "He touched my shoulder," I said steadily. "He told me he could make sure I passed if I agreed to meet him privately. When I refused, he threatened my scholarship." The prosecutor asked what happened next, and I explained everything: the emails, the fear, the farmhouse, and the sting operation. The courtroom was silent except for my voice. Every time I faltered, I caught sight of Samantha in the back row, her eyes full of strength, reminding me I wasn't alone. When the defense attorney stood up for cross-examination, the tone of the room shifted. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice calm but cutting, "you're a bright student, correct?" I nodded. "So bright, in fact, that you've maintained top grades every semester. Could it be that you misinterpreted Professor Hale's mentorship as something inappropriate?" "No," I said firmly. "He wasn't mentoring me. He was manipulating me." He smirked slightly. "And yet, you willingly went to his farmhouse that night?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Yes." "Because the police asked me to help catch him. I went there to stop him, not to please him." The defense attorney hesitated, then turned to his notes, but I could see his composure faltering. The prosecutor played the recording from that night next, the hidden camera footage and the audio from my jacket. The sound of Hale's voice filled the courtroom. "You deserve more than just grades, Emma. I can make things easier for you if you just learn to trust me." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Judge Mitchell's eyes hardened as she looked down at him. When the recording ended, I saw Hale glance toward me, but this time there was no arrogance in his eyes, only fear. After that, the testimonies continued. Mrs. Palmer confirmed she had seen him at the library late that evening. Officer Reed described the sting operation and arrest. Dean Laura Bennett testified about the university's internal investigation, confirming that several other students had come forward with similar stories. The weight of evidence grew heavier with each passing hour. By the time both sides rested, I felt the exhaustion deep in my bones, but also a strange peace. I had said everything I needed to say. I had faced him and told the truth. When Judge Mitchell finally spoke, her voice was firm but measured. "Professor Richard Hale," she began, "as an educator, you were entrusted with authority, respect, and influence. You used that trust to exploit and intimidate those you were meant to guide. The evidence presented leaves no doubt of your guilt." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "This court sentences you to 10 years in prison and revokes your teaching license permanently." For a moment, everything went silent. Then I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Samantha squeezed my hand, and I felt tears stream down my face, not from sadness, but from pure, unfiltered relief. As the bailiffs led him away, Hale turned his head toward me, but I didn't look back. I wasn't his victim anymore. I was free. When we stepped out of the courthouse, the rain had stopped, and the first light of afternoon broke through the clouds. Samantha smiled at me and said, "You did it, Emma." I looked at the courthouse steps behind us and whispered, "No, we did." The months that followed the trial felt like the slow return of sunlight after a long, dark winter. Life began to fall back into place, though nothing was quite the same anymore. The story had spread far beyond Portland State University. Students, parents, and faculty across Oregon were talking about it. The university introduced new policies for harassment reporting, and they even started a student advocacy program inspired by my case. But for me, the biggest change wasn't on paper, it was inside. I walked the same paths to class, sat in the same library where everything had begun, but now I carried something different. Peace. The fear that once shadowed me was gone, replaced by a quiet strength I didn't know I had. I poured that strength into finishing my degree, determined to graduate with the same focus I'd started with. Samantha never left my side. We still studied together, drank too much coffee before exams, and laughed about how strange it felt to be normal again. "You know," she said one night while we were sitting by the river downtown, "you could have transferred after everything. But you didn't. That's brave." I smiled softly. Leaving would have felt like letting him win. She nodded. "Then make sure when you walk across that stage, you hold your head high. You earned every step." Graduation day arrived on a warm afternoon in June. The university lawn was filled with rows of chairs and the hum of proud families. When I put on my cap and gown, my hands shook a little, but not from nerves, just from disbelief that this day had finally come. I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "You made it." As I walked onto the campus stage, the cheers from the crowd blurred into a soft wave of sound. Dean Laura Bennett stood at the podium, calling each name one by one. When she said, "Emma Carter, Bachelor of Psychology Honors," I felt my throat tighten. I stepped forward, accepted my diploma, and glanced out into the crowd. Samantha stood near the front, waving both arms like a maniac, her eyes glistening. I laughed through my tears and waved back. After the ceremony, Dean Bennett approached me personally. "Emma," she said warmly, "the university owes you more than we can ever say. Your courage changed this place." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a small certificate titled Bravery and Integrity Award. My eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling. "For believing me." She smiled gently. "No, thank you for believing in yourself." Later, as the crowd began to thin, Samantha and I walked together across the quad, the same place where I had once been too afraid to meet anyone's eyes. "So," she said, nudging me. What's next for Emma Carter? I looked up at the wide Portland sky, streaked with sunset gold. Graduate school, I said with a small laugh. And maybe volunteering for the advocacy program the university started. Samantha grinned. Of course you are. You were never just surviving, Emma, you were building something. Her words lingered in my mind as we reached the parking lot. I turned to look back one last time at the campus, the buildings, the library, the classrooms that had held both my pain and my triumph. I thought about the girl I was when I first walked here, carrying a backpack full of books and dreams, and how much she had grown. She had faced fear, betrayal, humiliation, but she never gave up. She turned her silence into strength. That night, I sat by my apartment window again, watching the city lights flicker against the horizon. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining like glass. I opened my journal and wrote the final words of this chapter. Justice doesn't erase the scars, but it teaches you how to wear them with pride. I am not broken. I am becoming. I closed the notebook, smiled, and whispered into the quiet room, to every girl who thinks she's alone, you're not.
Speak.
Because silence only protects the wrong. Then I turned off the light, letting the glow of Portland fill the room, and finally, after so long, I felt free enough to dream again. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm so glad you were here with me till the end. Before you go, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? Don't forget to subscribe to Stories View for more powerful stories like this one. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and keep listening.